Hello everyone, thanks for watching this video again. In this fifth part of the series, I'm going to cover one of the industries that's most wanted for students living in business schools, which is consulting. The format's going to be the same. I'm going to give a basic information on the industry, and then I'm going to invite a specialist to answer some questions with me. Today I have with me Sandeep Yella. He's an engineer with background in in research and development in the automotive industry, and he spent his time in summer in BCG and Mckinsey. Hello, Sandeep. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Tulio. Thanks for having me. I'm not really sure if I count as a specialist, but for sure, I'm happy to provide any insights.
Okay, great. I'm going to remove for a while, then I'll bring you back when we are in the questions. So this industry, when we look at it just as a snapshot, it's a $280 billion industry in US dollars. It's been growing consistently at 4% per year. One of the ways of looking at this, if we break into different categories, an easy way to do this is we break in strategy, operation, and human resources, which are the first part. This part is generally what is considered what is called as management consulting. These categories alone, they represent 50% of the market. And then we have financial advisor and IT, which would represent the rest of the market. When we look at the growth of 4% that we saw on last slide, it's being pushed mainly by operation and human resources, which are growing at 5%, then strategy, and then financial advisory and IT. Another way to look at this is geographically. So we can see that it's pretty concentrated. Just North America and Europe together, they represent almost 80% of the market, and then it's followed by Asia Pacific and Latin America. Even if we look at countries specifically, we're going to see it's very concentrated. So just United States, they have almost 50% of the market, and then they're followed by countries as United Kingdom and Germany, and then some of countries that are still developing a market like this. So which companies are we talking about? So the biggest one in this sector is actually Accenture. They have 24 billion in revenues every year, and then it's followed by the four companies that are normally called as Big Four, and then followed by companies that work more in the strategy part, and then McKinsey, BCG, and Bain, they're normally called as MBB. The reason why these top companies that are so big is mainly because they try to offer a lot of different services that were showed in the slides before. Important to mention that just the top 10 firms, they represent almost 40% of the market. So it's pretty considerable. So following on, if we look at recruiting process, so for the US market and for Europe, it's still very important the amount of students that are going to these industries. So in US, it's almost 30% of all of the students that leave business schools, they go to consulting. In Europe, it's even more. So almost 40% or 50% in INSEAD of the students leaving, they go to these industries. So whatever changes we have in these industries, for sure, it's going to impact the recruiting in business schools. Important to, when we look at the crisis, so how COVID crisis is going to impact on this. It's still very early to say. There are some forecasts out there. Here I'm going to base mine in Source Global Research. They expect that every different region is going to be an impact or a reduction in the revenue in this industry. It's expected that a 30 billion revenue reduction is going to happen. So in average 19% in all of this market. But again, some analysts might disagree a little bit. This is going to be pushed by Europe and Latin. We're going to reduce more, and then the other regions afterwards. Also, if we look at the industry, so which are the industries in which they are hiring or they're investing less in consulting projects, it's expected that business services and energy are going to be the ones that are going to reduce more. This is mainly because business service, we're talking about airlines, and energy, we're talking about companies that are expected to have less cash in the next year to invest in consulting projects. And there are other industries in which we expect that the impact is going to be a little bit smaller. Average 19% of reduction also here. So another way to look at this is if we start looking at picture, if we start looking a little bit as a movie, if you ask a company, are willing to hire an MBA student, we can see that there is some variation. So for example, in 2009, right after the 2008 crisis, it was about 65%. When you compare this with the average some years afterwards, you see there's a considerable reduction. Another way to look at this, if you look at the employment of the students living in business schools, and we actually see that there is some variation. So it went in 2009 of 88% to 95% in 2013, but still people are being able to go to the market and still find their job. So the difference here is not that big. So there is still some hope. And I would like to comment a little bit on that, bringing Sandeep to the table. Hello, Sandeep. Can you help me answering the first question would be, what are the qualities that make a good consultant? And if this would change considering this crisis?
Thank you, Tulio. So far, great insights into the industry in general. And so to answer your first question, like what are the qualities that make a good consultant? I think there's really two main things that make for a good consultant. Number one, his or her problem solving skills, and number two, his or her people skills, soft skills. And to elaborate a little bit more on both of these. So by problem solving skills, what I mean essentially is, as a consultant, we are hired to solve problems, oftentimes very difficult problems that arise at clients' situations, right? So we need to be able to solve those problems. And by that, I mean, we need to be able to break down a big problem into smaller problems in a structured way that enables us to solve these problems in a really efficient way. So that's what I mean by the problem solving side. And now the people side, and by soft skills, I mean, in general, the way you communicate with people, the way you lead people, and by leading, I mean your own teams, client members, and people above you, like partners, engagement managers and stuff. And at the same time, bringing all these people, all the resources around you together to solve the client's problems. Now, in the second part, especially on the communication side, I guess I see a lot of shift from having to work remotely online. It's something that I guess is being, we see a lot of change in this, and a good consultant would adapt to these changes as soon as possible. And that would mean being on top of all the online tools that are being used, and really using them effectively in their daily routine. I would say makes for a good adaptation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So moving on, is there anything that someone preparing for interviews or that's building the CV right now should do at this point, considering this new situation?
Yeah, so far in general, how you go about the process, the recruiting process is, you find companies that you're interested in, you send your application, and then they decide if they want to interview, and then once they do, you go through the interview process and you get an offer. And so how does this crisis affect, or this current situation affect this process, right? I would say there's really two main things that anybody can do and adapt a little bit to this crisis. Number one, again, going to the communication side, highlighting their strengths in a way, like communicating their strengths to the right people is something that you should be doing. That's before the application phase. For example, when you're communicating with HR people, or when you're communicating with consultants or engagement managers from the firms, you need to be really careful about doing so online. So I would say having a clear agenda for every meeting that you're going to have with during interactions with people from these firms would be very helpful, number one. And then number two, this crisis, I guess jumping in a little bit ahead of your third question, it provides a new opportunity for the people who are looking for a job, which is how can somebody differentiate themselves to the rest of the people that are in the same situation, basically. And one way to differentiate would be put extra effort. At the same time, you need to be smart about doing it. In general, what you do when you're preparing a CV, for example, at a business school, is you go to a second year student to get some feedback. Now even more so than ever, the time is super valuable, right? Not only of students but of the people from the firms. So how to make sure you get this done in a different way, while at the same time use this opportunity with second year student to rather discuss something else. So when I mean extra effort is to really so the recruiting numbers, I would say, in my personal opinion, the recruiting numbers are going to go down, right? Just because the whole economy is in general suffering, and that means less projects in general, and that means less number of people that are going to get hired in general. So let's say there's a pool of 10 people, while before this crisis, out of these 10 people, maybe 2 or 3 people were going to get an offer. Now, however, with this crisis, there's only one individual that's going to get on. That means, in general, more competitiveness. And the more you differentiate yourself within this group of 10 people by going that extra mile, by following up after a networking opportunity, by following up with HR people, constantly staying in touch, communication. These are all going to be even important and relevant in these times, I would say.
That's a very interesting advice. And I would add that now that everything is working remotely, there you need to find maybe new ways in order to approach people, in order to networking and do this additional mile that you mentioned. I would like to move for the next question. So for a second block in which imagine someone who already got an offer for summer internship or full-time. So these people, is there anything they should do differently right now before starting their internship?
Yeah, so remotely, I'm assuming that those of us, who do have a summer internship offer, I guess there's two things that I see two scenarios, right? One thing is as the people who have offer going to the offices and working from the office, or the other people who are being asked to work remotely.
Mm-hmm.
Now for both, so for the first set of people who are going to office, I guess for them it's going to be, my advice is going to be something similar to what I have been saying to other, so far before this point, to the people who approached me. It's constantly making sure three things mainly: constantly making sure you're aligned with your engagement manager or project leader on what your role, what your module is, and making sure he fully understands that you are in ownership of your module. And then number two, I'm reaching out for help whenever you need. Then this basically means so for most of us, we're not coming from consulting backgrounds who get into these internship roles, right? And that means we are not as fully equipped as an associate or other people at the firm are. And it's totally expected of us to struggle at the beginning. And part of the struggle is also finding the right people to approach for help when it's needed, and identifying when we need help. So if we do these two things right, then so who are going to do the summer internship remotely, I would say there's two things. Like before we even get into the internship, the first thing that we want to make sure is build ourselves a work room within our homes or wherever we are staying. And by work room, I mean having a good laptop, a good desk, a chair that we can feel comfortable sitting whole day, and essentially having good internet connection, because everything is going to be remotely done. And that means us preparing ourselves for on that angle, like the hard stuff angle, technical stuff angle. The other stuff I would say is, right now, we touched upon this a little bit earlier. The communication is going to be even more essential now, because we do not have that face-to-face interacting opportunity. And so finding additional time, meeting time with the teammates and project leader is going to be more imperative. And after finding time, making sure we don't waste their time. That means having a clear agenda for each and every meeting that we have with the people around us is going to be crucial, I'd say.
That's perfect. And still thinking of the public who are preparing for their job, they might start in some months from now. What would be the best ways for them to contact their companies, understand what's going on, get a better understanding of the whole situation?
So I would say three different sets of resources that I would encourage people to focus on to better understand the situation and stuff. Number one, speaking with HR people. So these people, the HR, the human resources people, it's their job to make sure the students who do have the offers feel comfortable and feel ready and stuff. So these are the people that we should be really reaching out to in the first place with any concerns that we have, be it the kind of projects that you want to be involved with, or be it, working, like remotely working tools or anything. They should be the first people that you should reach out to, and reaching out to them online. And again, making sure you have a clear agenda when you reach out to them. Number two, I would say the most important thing is in general alumni and those in your friend circle or seniors from your business school or from your undergraduate college, if you're that person, or in general, anybody in your friends, if you're general public, right? And reaching out to those people, understanding what they did and what worked out for them and what they could have done better. And then the final resource I would say to really understand the situation for ourselves is in general following articles like Financial Times or Mckinsey Quarterly could be a good thing. So in general, doing the research on different types of industries that you believe are the focal points of the office where you're going to intern at.
Yeah, that's useful. For sure, there's a lot of resources that people might try to reach. And now that everyone is at home, some of them, they might be even easier. Okay, Sandeep, thank you a lot for answering my questions. I think people watching would appreciate. I just have a final disclaimer. Some of the information that was shown in the presentation, especially regarding revenues, they are estimations. So because this information is not public, and also what we expect to happen during this crisis is actually we're still within the crisis, so it's kind of difficult to say, but these are the estimations that we have at this point. So Sandeep, thank you again.
Thank you, Tulio.
Bye-bye.